Picture the smartest person you know, the one who solves complex problems, reads constantly, speaks fluently on deep topics, yet every night they scroll mindlessly for an hour and wonder why they feel so empty when the lights go off. Now picture this. They know exactly what they're doing, they've read the articles, they understand the dopamine loops, they've even given advice to other people about it, and they do it anyway, every single night, without fail. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the self-improvement space wants to say out loud. Intelligence does not protect you from self-destructive patterns. In fact, for reasons that psychology, neuroscience, and some of the deepest philosophical traditions all agree on, the smarter you are, the more sophisticated your blind spots become. This phenomenon has a name. Researchers and behavioral scientists call it the awareness gap. And it refers to the invisible but measurable distance between what a person knows and what a person actually does. The fracture between understanding a problem clearly and having the lived experience of being free from it. What makes the awareness gap particularly devastating for high-functioning people is this. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like ignorance or denial. It feels like being perfectly awake while somehow still sleepwalking. And the habits living inside that gap are almost impossible to see from inside the gap itself. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why your awareness, as sophisticated as it may already be, has been operating at a fraction of its true capacity, and you'll have the specific framework for what it actually takes to close the gap, not temporarily, but for good. But before we can close anything, we need to understand what awareness actually is. Because if you're like most intelligent people, your definition of it is missing the most important part. Most educated, thoughtful people operate with a flawed definition of awareness. They conflate it with intelligence, or with mindfulness, or with paying attention. And this confusion isn't just a semantic issue. It is the very root of why the gap exists and why it's so difficult to close. Mystic and yogi, Sadhguru draws a precise and devastating distinction. Mental alertness, the ability to focus your attention on something, is not the same as awareness. Attention is something you can switch on and switch off, like a spotlight you point at whatever feels urgent. Awareness, by contrast, is not an act of the mind at all. Awareness, in this deeper sense, is the intensity of your aliveness itself. It is not what you are focusing on, but how awake the being doing the focusing actually is. And this distinction changes everything, because you can be mentally sharp, technically brilliant, analytically gifted, and operating at a very low level of awareness simultaneously. To understand this viscerally, think about the last time you were sitting in a conversation, fully present by all outward appearances. Eyes open, head nodding, socially appropriate, but internally you were somewhere else entirely. The words were hitting your eardrums, but nothing was actually landing. The lights were on, but the wakefulness had dimmed. That experience, the gap between stimulation and perception, is precisely what Sadhguru is pointing to when he says that awareness is about the voltage of your life energy. The sound reaching your ears is irrelevant if the receiver is running on low power, and the same principle governs every habit, every choice, and every automatic pattern in your life. Osho, the spiritual master, approached the same truth from a different angle. He described how most people treat awareness the way they treat religion. As a Sunday practice, a scheduled 20-minute meditation in the morning, a brief moment of self-reflection before the automaticity of daily life swallows everything whole again. But real awareness cannot be a Sunday practice. It has to be more like breathing, something that cannot go on holiday, something that colors every action and every moment. Not dramatically, not effortfully, but as a continuous quality of presence that infuses the way you eat, the way you speak, the way you fall asleep, the way you drive, the way you check your phone. When you understand awareness this way, not as a skill you deploy, but as a quality of being you either inhabit or don't, the awareness gap reveals itself as something far more interesting than a productivity problem or a willpower failure. It is a gap in aliveness, and closing it requires something completely different than most self-improvement content will ever tell you. And here's where the story takes a turn that most people never expect. Because when you look at the science of why smart people specifically fall into this gap, what you find is almost insulting in its irony. Here is the painful irony at the center of the awareness gap. The very cognitive machinery that makes a person intelligent, the pattern recognition, the rapid abstraction, the ability to build and maintain complex mental models, is the same machinery that makes automatic, unconscious behavior invisible to them. Your brain is, at its core, an efficiency engine. It evolved not to maximize your experience of life, but to conserve energy and automate everything it safely can. And intelligence, in the brain's operational logic, is essentially the ability to automate faster and at a higher level of complexity than other brains. This means that when a highly intelligent person repeats a behavior, even a destructive one, their brain doesn't just form a habit, it builds an architecture around that habit. It generates supporting narratives, contextual justifications, and intellectual frameworks that make the behavior feel not just acceptable, but rational, even virtuous. The late nights aren't procrastination, they're deep work. The social withdrawal isn't avoidance, it's introvert recharging. The obsessive overanalysis isn't anxiety, it's thoroughness. The doom scrolling isn't weakness, it's staying informed. Every single self-destructive pattern gets a press agent, and the smarter you are, the more convincing the press agent sounds. The psychological literature on this is both fascinating and humbling. Behavioral scientists consistently find that higher cognitive ability correlates with more sophisticated self-deception, not less. Because the same mental horsepower that lets you solve complex external problems can be entirely redirected toward defending the internal status quo. Research on cognitive load also confirms that mental clutter from unresolved patterns and incomplete emotional processing actively competes with your capacity to perceive clearly. And high-functioning people tend to carry the most mental clutter, precisely because they're always processing, always analyzing, always holding multiple unresolved threads in simultaneous suspension. The evolution of consciousness itself offers a parallel. From the earliest organisms that moved through their environment on pure automatic response, to the development of memory and the capacity for planning, at every stage of greater cognitive complexity, the brain gained both sharper perception and a more sophisticated ability to override that perception with stored assumptions. Consciousness. What this means practically is that you cannot think your way out of the awareness gap. In fact, thinking harder about it often deepens it, because the gap is not located in your intellect. It is located in the space between your intellect and your actual moment-by-moment experience of being alive. So if intelligence isn't the solution, and more information isn't the solution, then what actually is? And to answer that, we need to understand the precise levels at which awareness operates, because not all awareness is created equal. Awareness is not a binary state. You are not either aware or unaware. It exists on a gradient, a spectrum of depth and clarity, and most people spend their entire adult lives fluctuating between the bottom two levels without ever realizing there are two more above them that would fundamentally change their experience of being alive. The first level is reactive awareness, the default mode for most adults. You respond to stimuli, feel emotions, make decisions, navigate life, but it all unfolds automatically, driven by existing programs, like a thermostat adjusting temperature without questioning if it's even the right setting.
Reactive Awareness, Kemenem, Level 1.
The second level is reflective awareness, where most self-aware people think they live. You examine your behavior, recognize patterns, gain clarity about why you do what you do, but you're always looking backward. The moment you return to regular life, the automatic programs resume control. If this video is showing you something about yourself that you haven't seen this clearly before, subscribe and hit the bell, because every week on this channel, we go deeper into the psychology of why people do what they do and how to genuinely change it. The third level is real-time awareness, and this is where the game begins to change. At this level, you catch the pattern as it's actually happening. You feel the pull toward the phone, and you observe that pull without immediately surrendering to it. You notice the tightening in your chest before an argument escalates, and you see it clearly enough. to choose differently. You're no longer just replaying the footage. You are present in the scene. The fourth level, the one Sadhguru describes as heightened wakefulness, is the state where perception has sharpened to the point where you don't just observe your patterns, you see through them. You understand their origin, their architecture, their cost, their function, all at once, with a clarity so complete that the pattern cannot run in the dark anymore. Here's the crucial insight. For many self-aware people, the problem isn't operating at level 1. It's that they've developed such sophisticated level 2 awareness, it masquerades as level 3. They describe patterns precisely, articulate triggers accurately, yet still can't stop the behavior. Reflection without presence changes nothing. What all 4 levels share, they're not permanent states, fixed traits, or determined by personality, intelligence, or background. They correlate with what Sadhguru calls your life energy voltage, the intensity at which you're alive in any moment. And that voltage is something you can actively, deliberately raise. But before we get to the practical work of raising that voltage, we need to understand the exact mechanism by which the gap forms. Because without understanding the mechanics, every intervention targets the symptom and leaves the cause completely untouched. The awareness gap does not form because you are undisciplined or unmotivated or not trying hard enough. It forms because your brain is doing precisely what it was designed by millions of years of evolution to do. Protect your energy by converting repeated behaviors into automatic, invisible, below-threshold processes that require no conscious oversight whatsoever. The scientists who study the evolution of consciousness describe awareness itself as having emerged for a single original purpose: to direct a mobile, hungry organism toward food and away from danger. And once that navigation was no longer needed in any given moment, the brain was hardwired to hand the controls back to automation, because conscious attention is metabolically expensive.
Hungry, awareness on.
Food found, awareness off.
Task complete, awareness auto off. Same wiring.
Think about the last time you drove a familiar commute and arrived with no memory of the journey. You don't remember the turns, lights, or intersections because your brain classified it all as sufficiently mastered to no longer require your awareness. Your habits, including those quietly dismantling your health, relationships, focus, and sense of self, operate the same way. Once a behavior repeats enough in the same context, it descends below conscious perception. It becomes invisible not because it stops, but because your brain no longer flags it. And here is where the psychology of the overly aware adds a dimension that almost no one talks about. For people who have developed deep perceptual sensitivity, often as an adaptive response to unpredictable or emotionally demanding environments early in life, the nervous system learns to scan outward with extraordinary precision, while simultaneously developing elaborate mechanisms for not seeing. Other people's emotional states can coexist with a profound blind spot toward your own automatic patterns. This is why you can be the most emotionally intelligent person in every room, sensing unspoken tension, reading subtext in a glance, feeling the weight of silence, yet remain completely unconscious of patterns running your own life. Your perceptual aperture was trained outward. Turning it inward requires entirely different practice. Some of the deepest philosophical work on consciousness argues that every habit, every recurring pattern, every self-limiting behavior is a projection of the story you hold about who you are. And that story runs so deep, feels so much like reality, that you're not relating to it as a story at all. You're relating to it as the truth. The terrifying and liberating truth. The gap isn't in your behavior, that's just the symptom. The gap is in your identity, in the self-concept automatically generating the behavior beneath conscious thought. Any strategy targeting behavior while leaving identity untouched produces change that lasts only until identity reasserts itself. Which means that closing the gap requires something far more radical than a new morning routine or a better productivity system. It requires a shift at the level of who you understand yourself to be. And that shift begins with a practice that is deceptively simple but profoundly misunderstood. Every tradition producing real, lasting transformation cognitive behavioral science, Eastern philosophy, consciousness research, lived testimony of deep change, converges on the same practice. You cannot change what you cannot see. And seeing clearly requires sustained, present-moment attention that almost none of us were ever taught. Osho offered the simplest description. Whatever you're doing, do it consciously, not perfectly, not differently, not with any agenda, but simply consciously. Move your hand with full attention and notice the shift. When movement is mechanical, there's no grace. When conscious, there is. This applies to every action in your life.
The mechanical hand is rigid. The conscious hand has grace.
This isn't conventional meditation, not about sitting still, emptying your mind, or achieving any state. It's about bringing real, present, deliberate attention into ordinary autopilot moments. Your first 10 minutes awake, how you eat lunch, open an app, respond to messages, or transition between tasks. Sadhguru adds crucial insight. You can't force awareness to increase, like willing a light bulb brighter by staring at it, but you can raise the voltage. Work on the energy intensity running through the system, and awareness naturally sharpens as consequence. The path to closing the gap isn't primarily cognitive at all. Practically, this means that chronic sleep deprivation, chronic low-grade dehydration, chronic physical inactivity, and chronic overstimulation from screens are not just health problems. They are awareness problems. They systematically lower the voltage, which lowers the wakefulness, which narrows the perception, which makes the habits that live in the gap harder and harder to see.
Sleep deprivation, dehydration, inactivity, screen overstimulation, awareness narrowed, clarity restored.
Studies show even brief exposure to low-quality, high-stimulation content elevates cortisol, your threat response hormone. Chronically elevated cortisol narrows perception and reduces access to your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for self-reflection, impulse regulation, and conscious decision-making. Every mindless scroll literally widens the gap. The psychology of hyper-awareness teaches, for people who developed excessive sensitivity through adaptive experiences, closing the gap isn't about seeing more, it's about carrying less. Learning to observe without absorbing, notice without interpreting, let perceptions exist in awareness without converting them instantly into assignments or emergencies. The practical entry point every tradition agrees on. Choose one daily autopilot behavior, a routine running without conscious participation, and for 7 days perform it with total deliberate attention. Don't try to change or judge it, just watch with the curiosity of encountering it for the first time. When awareness touches an automatic pattern, something shifts that willpower never could. And when that shift happens, when you genuinely bring sustained awareness to something you have been doing unconsciously for years, something unexpected occurs at a deeper level. Something that the philosophers and the neuroscientists and the behavioral researchers all describe from their different vantage points in remarkably similar language. Here's what separates genuine transformation from endless cycles of attempting change. It's not the behavior that needs to change first, it's the observer. The moment you truly see a pattern with real-time awareness, watching it rather than being it, you've created a gap between yourself and the behavior. That gap is where freedom lives. The deepest research on consciousness and identity converges on one uncomfortable truth. Your concept of self is the silent architect of every behavior you produce. You don't act your way into a new identity. You identify your way into new actions. And any change that bypasses this level will be overwritten by the identity the moment pressure arrives.
You don't act your way into a new identity. Rebuild the foundation first.
Consciousness's origin reveals something profound. The first evolutionary step wasn't thinking or planning. It was directional movement, turning toward what's needed rather than wandering randomly. Your first step out of the awareness gap is identical. Not grand insight, but quietly, consistently turning attention toward what's happening inside you now. Osho described the culmination. A day comes, for anyone practicing continuous awareness with commitment, when the body sleeps and awareness remains, present like a quiet flame. Then the meditation is complete. Not because you've achieved something extraordinary, but because you've become someone genuinely, continuously, uninterruptedly alive. The psychology of deeply aware people confirms this from the opposite direction. Exhaustion, overanalysis, emotional absorption, endless loops of perception without presence. These aren't the inevitable fate of a sensitive mind. They're symptoms of awareness never taught to rest, forged in vigilance, never learning the danger has passed.
The danger has passed.
Closing the awareness gap is not about eliminating sensitivity or suppressing intelligence. It is about transforming both. Letting your awareness become less like a security camera scanning for threats and more like a warm, steady light. Not harsh, not blinding, but a presence that illuminates without exhausting, that sees clearly without carrying everything it sees. The awareness gap is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Every habit running in the dark has been waiting for one thing. Not for you to think harder, but to wake up 1 degree more fully than yesterday. Leave a comment with the one pattern you're ready to face, and subscribe, because our videos can go even deeper into the mechanics of the mind that no one ever taught you in school.